Okay, next up is our third and last presentation. It is my senior thesis group. If they want to go ahead and share their slides and get started when they're ready.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to our presentation. Our senior thesis research project this semester focused on the stress that judges experience.
I'm Jalen Carter.
I'm Jordan Holmes.
I'm Alisa Rogers.
I'm Erin Tinkler.
And I'm Samantha Way.
All right, so I think we can all agree that everyone experiences stress throughout our daily lives, whether that be in a positive or a negative way. And we define stress as feelings of emotional or physical tension. And at an appropriate level, stress can be a good thing. It is beneficial for our development and survival, but can be a negative thing at high levels. And chronic exposure to high levels of stress can be detrimental to your well-being. And these negative effects of stress can manifest in a variety of occupations, such as law enforcement, social workers, first responders, and those in the judicial system. And so our interest in the current research was mainly focused on stress in the courtroom. Previous research on stress in the courtroom has focused on groups involved in the judicial system, such as attorneys and jurors. Surveys examining stress among attorneys in the past have demonstrated mental health consequences among attorneys, such as symptoms of depression and PTSD, and when working with clients who have been exposed to trauma. Jurors, on the other hand, unlike attorneys, have little to no experience in the legal system, so exposure to graphic evidence or testimony during court can be shocking to them, which may lead to trauma and secondary traumatic stress. And secondary traumatic stress is caused by secondhand exposure to trauma through interacting with others who are experiencing trauma firsthand and can result in symptoms that are similar to PTSD. Previous research on jurors has shown that as much as 50% of jurors displayed symptoms of trauma, which may persist even months after trials have ended. And judges are immersed into these stressful situations daily as part of their occupation, and so they can be personally impacted just like jurors and attorneys.
So research on stress in the legal field has expanded to include judges, and judicial stress has a variety of causes, and surveys with judges reveal sources such as facing the impact of their decision, having a heavy workload, dealing with unprepared attorneys, and other concerns such as safety outside the courtroom and managing juror stress. Facing high levels of stress can lead to occupational burnout for judges. Depending on personal characteristics such as their age or gender and courtroom experiences, some judges may reach a point of burnout sooner than others. Coping mechanisms for judicial stress include positive strategies such as social support and negative strategies such as distraction or suppressing emotions. Recommendations for coping strategies for judges include hotlines and judicial mentoring programs to reduce stress levels. This study focused on how judges experience stress and their potential for secondary traumatic stress. So this means that we wanted to gain a better understanding of the causes and effects that comes from being a judge, and specifically on how their interactions with the information from the cases they preside over impact them.
So the participants in our study consisted of 18 circuit court judges from both North and South Carolina, 10 being from South Carolina and 8 being from North Carolina. The majority of the judges were white males. However, we were able to interview a woman. The average age of the judges was around 61 years old, and time on the bench ranged from 5 to 29 years. We conducted these interviews virtually and used a semi-structured interview format. Interviews averaged around 30 minutes, and judges were asked a total of 15 questions. The questions examined the effects of judicial stress through identifying specific types of cases, evidence, and circumstances that impacted judges emotionally, how they managed emotions during difficult situations in court, and in what ways they experienced physical and mental impacts of stress. The results were then analyzed for frequencies, patterns, and relationships. And today we are presenting our key findings. So when judges were asked, of all the cases you've heard as a judge, what would you estimate is the percentage that you found highly stressful? Their responses ranged from 1 to 100%. One judge stated that he found only 1% of the cases he sees to be highly stressful, while a different judge said he found all of the cases he presided over to be stressful. But the majority of the responses given fell into a range of 1 to 20%, followed closely by 1 to 10%. There was a wide variability in their answers, as we might expect there to be, because everyone experiences and perceives stress differently. Judges were then asked, what do you think are the top 3 to 5 sources of stress for a judge as it pertains to hearing a case? The most frequent response, as you can see on the graph, was that making life-altering decisions was a main source of stress. Additionally, any type of case involving children had the second highest response frequency, and courtroom management was the third most frequent response from judges. Courtroom management can be described as making sure the court runs smoothly, management of jurors, and so on. When asked about what kinds of cases and evidence judges found the most emotionally taxing, judges responded both that cases involving children and cases involving abuse elicited the strongest emotions. Many judges recalled cases of child neglect that were so awful it haunts them to this day. When it comes to evidence presented, judges have to see all evidence that lawyers want to present in courtrooms in order to determine if that evidence is admissible. When judges were asked what types of evidence elicited the strongest emotions, gruesome evidence, which include photos of autopsies or photos of crime scenes, and any type of evidence involving children were mentioned.
So as Erin mentioned briefly, there are instances in which cases that judges hear stick with them and kind of haunt them up to days, weeks, months, or even years after the cases are heard. So we asked judges about this and found that the majority of judges are still thinking about these cases long after the cases are heard, and that only 11% are not. And that out of those who are thinking about these cases, many judges recalled more gruesome or highly emotional cases, while we also found, interestingly, that 22% of judges are still thinking about funny cases long after the case is heard. So we asked judges if there are any physical or emotional effects that come with the stress of being a judge. We found that about half of judges are experiencing trouble sleeping, whether that is difficulty falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night, either dreaming or just thinking about these emotional cases. Other judges are experiencing fatigue or high blood pressure, and some judges don't experience any physical symptoms at all. In regard to emotional symptoms, we found that about half of judges do feel extremely isolated, whether that means they just feel lonely or like they don't have anyone to talk to or sort of just convey that work stress to. And we also found that many judges are irritable or anxious and paranoid. We even had one judge remark that he carried a gun with him outside of the courtroom because of that paranoia. Other judges reported feeling overwhelmed, and we even found that some judges did not experience any emotional symptoms at all. All right, in regard to strategies for reducing this work stress, we found that about half of judges either turn to exercise or hobbies. The exercise included things like going to the gym or just running outside daily. And we found that for hobbies, they could range from hunting and fishing to even riding motorcycles. Other than that, judges often relied on time with friends or family or reading non-legal works to reduce that work stress. And interestingly, we found that a few judges rely on their drive to and from work to reduce that work stress, just to kind of take time to themselves before and after entering the courtroom to clear their minds. So in order to reduce this work stress, we ask judges about their opinions on an organizational level stress reduction program or strategies. And we found that about half of judges believe that this could be helpful, while other judges thought that it may be helpful for some people, but not for everybody. And then other judges thought that it would not be helpful at all, or that it could be a waste of their already limited resources. Out of those who said yes or maybe, judges suggested things like workshops or educational programs geared towards judicial stress, or suggested sabbatical or time off, or connecting with other judges in order to combat that isolation.
So, as our results suggest, and as you've probably guessed, judges are stressed. And these stresses can come from inside the courtroom factors such as having to repeatedly view gruesome evidence or having to listen to particularly emotional victim testimony. Outside the courtroom stressors consist of job isolation and not being able to hang out with your attorney friends that you gain throughout your career because you don't want to show any favoritism within your courtroom. The results of our interview also suggest that our participants have cases that still impact them over the years, ranging from funny cases that are pleasant to hear at dinner time parties, or cases that make them want to hold their children a little tighter at night. However, most of the judges feel that these stresses are just a part of the job. Since the study of judicial stress is a recently developed field, we use the semi-structured interview design to just gain some more information on judicial stress. However, the quality of our results are dependent on the reliability of our participants' responses. Future studies should use actual case facts and manipulate variables, possibly stress-related variables, and measure cortisol levels and how stress impacts judicial verdicts or decision-making directly. Another limitation of our study was our participant pool, which was relatively small, consisting of only 18 judges, majority white, consisted of only one female judge, and were made up of judges only from North and South Carolina, which possibly biased our sample. So we proposed for the criminal justice system is that while some states enact an age limit for judges to retire, such as North Carolina, we suggest that a term limit be imposed to help mitigate and minimize the long-term and short-term impacts of stress on judges. While a mandatory counseling or mentoring program might be unpopular with certain judges, we strongly suggest that a counseling or mentoring program be put in place in order to help ease the burden of the job, to help reduce stress by creating an environment that judges can vent and talk about bothersome cases, and to allow judges to meet each other and talk to each other to understand and gain different methods of coping with the job over the years and how to better impact justice. We also suggest possibly hiring more judges in order to ease caseloads. However, by talking to judges, we know that the resources within the criminal justice system are already stretched thin, so this might not be as feasible as we'd like it to be. However, overall, we've learned that judges experience stress that impacts them both physically and emotionally, and that the legal system should be improved to accommodate judges' physical and psychological needs. And with that being said, we'd like to thank our thesis advisor, Dr. McQuiston, for helping us and guiding us through this research. We'd like to thank our participating judges for taking time out of their busy schedules and listening to our conducting interviews with us, as well as their courtroom staff for coordinating with us and scheduling these interviews. We'd also like to thank Chelsea McNeil and Mark Rabel, who assisted in contacting judges. And without them, we would not have been able to do this study. So for them, we're very grateful. Any questions?
All right. All right, let's thank this group. Great job, you guys. Does anybody have any questions for this group? Mark, yes.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
This is great. I'm Mark Rabel. I was one of the ones that helped you find the judges in North Carolina. So I was really interested in what the results were, and we're going to be talking about this at another symposium, right, Dawn?
Yes.
So this does raise a lot of questions. I guess it is a problem that there's only one woman. And what I think of is we, at our symposium on secondary trauma in February, we're going to have someone who studied like 700 immigration lawyers. There's a lot of women in that group. And so that hers is not a sophisticated study, such as yours is more anecdotal, but she does come up with a number of differences based on gender. So I find that really interesting. And it does raise, I was kind of curious before I go into the serious questions, like what examples of funny cases? You said 22% of judges had funny cases that stick with them. Any good examples of that?
I had one judge who told me that he still thinks about, I guess like stereotypically funny cases, like two women get into a bar fight over a man, just something like that. That's what he told me.
Yeah,
Anybody else have any good examples? Or Judge Griffith, would you like to pop in and give us any examples of funny cases? Judge Griffith, we can't hear you. There we go.
Okay, now I couldn't figure out how to unmute. Well, I think the most amusing thing is sometimes what people say to you, trying to get a lesser sentence or something, and they'll tell you about their health maladies and their children's problems, but they may say something like this is, I just had surgery, I got to have surgery on my eye. The doctor says I have a detached rectum. And that'll just, it just kills the, but I mean, you hear so many things like, that's one of my favorite examples, but another guy had this pain down in his legs. It was just throbbing and carrying on. It was the gout. So those are some of my favorite things to hear, is what people are trying to impart to you to try to lessen their time down the road.
Right. Thank you, Judge. Students, any other examples that come to mind? Oh, Allie, sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering what y'all think the effect of race is on your study. Did you look at that at all as a factor?
Well, almost all of our judges were white. So like future studies, we'd like to have a much more diverse participant pool. But just for this study particularly, I don't think there were no really effects of race, just because our participant pool is so homogeneous.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
All right. Mark, did you have
another question? As a result of this, or in terms of remedies, were there any suggestions by any of the judges that certain types of cases should just not be court cases? Like, it's, I think, significant that a lot of the child abuse cases were, the most stressful, and maybe death penalty, maybe next level down. Was there any suggestion that these types of cases should be handled in a different format other than court, or such things that maybe we shouldn't have a death penalty because of the types of evidence that are involved with it?
Go ahead.
So I was one of the people in our group that sort of went through all of the interviews and listened to everything. And we didn't have any judges suggest anything like that. We didn't have any judges sort of comment on the death penalty or any capital punishment or any of their opinions regarding that. They mostly stuck to the questions and told us some stories of what they experienced in court. So opposite from those larger cases, we did have a lot of judges comment on how when they hear traffic court cases and things that are very minor and that they hear almost every day, that they sort of don't even think about it when they're doing that. So there could be some sort of thing in the future where those, like the bigger cases and then the like smaller traffic court cases are separated, if that answers your question.
We also I'm not sure we asked anything that would have led down that road anyway. So that's a great suggestion for the future. Yeah. Any other questions? Dr. Lefebvre, yes.
So you're going to have to forgive my ignorance, but since we have some of the judges with us, is there any kind of education for when you become a judge? I know that you're elected to a position or you're appointed to a position. Is there any kind of like training on how to be a judge? Because when we're being trained as clinicians, we're encouraged to talk to each other sort of, within sort of the cone of silence, within the confidentiality, to sort of like the group suggested, to decompress and to sort of work out some of these issues. Is that encouraged among judges, like to get together and sort of talk to each other about some of these more difficult cases to sort of help with resilience or help with anything along those lines?
Judge Maddox or Judge Griffith, would you like to?
Well, first, this is Judge Maddox. First, if you use Bubba Griffith, then your study is skewed anyway for mental health reasons. When South Carolina is one of the few states that doesn't elect judges. We're selected through a fairly detailed process of judicial merit selection, which is a good thing because we're able to rule without the concern of being elected. And I've been in politics years ago, and it was a terrible thing. But once you're elected, you're required to sit with a sitting judge for 4 weeks, which is a very miserable experience. Then we have a short 1 week South Carolina judges, pretty intense week-long period of study. But then we're all sent to Reno. Oddly enough, the National Judicial College is in Reno, Nevada. We're sent out there for 4 weeks. Now, when I started 19 years ago, we went for 4 weeks, and I think Bubba was at the same way, Bubba Griffin. Now it has been shortened to 2 weeks, but that is a very intense 8 to 7. If you have to make up a 2-minute, if you miss 2 minutes, you make up 2 minutes. It was a very intense 4 weeks. But when you come back, you are sent out of your area for about 6 months to make all your mistakes. So while we all have statewide jurisdiction, you don't stay in Anderson, where I'm in Anderson, South Carolina. You don't stay here you don't come back here for at least 6 months. So you go there, you make your mistakes, you come back, you continue to make mistakes, and hopefully you learn. But I enjoyed this very much. It made me think a lot about some of the things that I needed to do.
Thank you, Judge Maddox.
Sure.
Judge Hood.
I was going to keep my video off until I realized Cordell was on here, and it wouldn't matter what I had on because he wouldn't be dressed up. But I just wanted to say, as to the training, and I guess the back end of that question was about, do y'all sit around and talk about it together? And in some instances you do, but you also have the judicial canons, which say if you go to an outside source outside the record for advice or kind of your thought process or something else, then, you have to let all the parties know you've done that. It's kind of frowned upon in the judicial canons to go outside what's on the record before you. So, I will tell you, and Bubba and Cordell have been on the bench a lot longer than I have. I was actually appearing in front of them, when I was a lawyer. But I will tell you that the camaraderie, the one thing that was never described to me as a judge prior to going on the bench was the camaraderie amongst the 49 circuit court judges in South Carolina. It is like a small family, and, we really do rely on each other for, emotional support because, sometimes even your spouse or your loved ones or even your friends who are lawyers can't understand the impact that these cases can have on you and the impact they can have on your life. So, it is, I can pick up the phone and call Bubba because Bubba and I have, both handled, tried death penalty cases in the past couple of years, high profile death penalty. He was trying a death penalty case in the spring of 2019 at the exact same time I was in another corner of the state. So, that camaraderie to understand, the pressures of that, is good, but we have to be careful with, really going outside of it for what I would call legal advice or to get somebody else's opinion.
Right. Thank you, Judge Hood. All right. Any other questions?
Can I also comment on Dr. LaFif's question as well?
Please do.
Okay, so going through the results, we did hear a lot of judges mention their time in Reno and how when they're over there, they're taught to really try their hardest to separate their courtroom emotions from their emotions at home. To whenever you leave the courtroom, leave everything that you heard there, everything that you felt there in the courtroom. However, we obviously found that it's hard for a lot of judges to do that, and that they do take these emotions home with them. And I know I had a judge who has been in the field for a little bit longer. He commented that there is, I feel like it's something that not a lot of judges talk about, but especially within male judges, feeling that pressure to be very masculine and to hide your emotions. And that's just something that not a lot of judges talk about, I feel like. But that is something that we had a few judges comment on, that pressure to keep everything internalized and to act like everything's okay when obviously you are really stressed.
And the reason for that is you can't impart what you're feeling or hearing to the jury. That's just, you can't do that. Or you're not supposed to do that. That's just one of the suggestions, is the jury cannot be impacted by what the judge's view of the evidence is. That's supposed to be the jury's decision. Judge impacts, not their fact finding, only the legal decisions. So
right.
Gets tough sometimes.
It's why I'm married to a psychiatrist.
Yeah, I meant to bring that up, but you're lucky, huh?
Yeah.
You get constant psychiatric care.
Yeah, but it's not real good.
Yeah, I'll deny that. I know this is excellent care.
Yeah. You made a mistake not muting us. I'm just telling you right now.
I can see that, Judge Madden. I can see that. We've hijacked this entire thing.
Yeah, I'm muting myself.
All right. Why don't we wrap it up? Special shout out to the judges who showed up to watch. So thank you. Thank you all. Excellent presentations by all the students. So how about one last round of applause to everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is wrapping up our semester. This is our last day at Wofford today. So thank you for tuning into this virtual series of presentations. So everybody stay safe and stay healthy, and thanks for showing up today.